Welcome to the Red Story. Please subscribe and like it because it's not difficult for you. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we have a story of a man whose wife cheated on him when he was out of town. My wife's business trip was a cover for her weekend with her coworker. When I found her packing sexy clothes and protections, I slapped her, threw her out, and informed her dad to pick her up. Then I decided to divorce her. My name is Brad. I'm a 34-year-old male, and my wife Beth is 33. We met 10 years ago and have been married for 7 years. I've always believed we had a great marriage. No lies, no secrets, just a loving, trusting relationship that's been nearly perfect both physically and emotionally. Beth works as a real estate agent, and I work in sales for a regional computer company. We don't have kids. We both work on commission and are good at our jobs. About 2 months ago, Beth started talking about a new hire in her office, another real estate agent named Tom. She told me Tom was funny, smart, and had great ideas about boosting sales, blah, blah, blah. When she mentioned starting a sales team with him, I got concerned. Beth is always one of the top 3 salespeople in her office, so I asked how teaming up with Tom would boost her sales, but she didn't have a sensible answer. When I asked what was going on with this guy, she said there was nothing, that they were just workmates. But after that, she stopped talking about him. Then the week before last, Beth told me she was going away for compulsory training, which was scheduled to start on Friday. The training was supposed to cover changes in real estate law, and Beth said it was something her boss insisted she attend. She said it was being held at a resort in a city about an hour and a half away by plane. She was supposed to fly out Friday afternoon at around 6:00 p.m. and return early Sunday morning. According to her, her office took care of all the arrangements, and she'd leave for the airport at around 4:00 p.m. I had an important meeting that Friday with a customer, so I told Beth I couldn't take her to the airport. She reassured me, saying her office had hired a car to take her to the airport and bring her back on Sunday. I didn't need to worry about her transportation. Friday afternoon came, and I had a meeting scheduled at 2:30 with one of my best customers to discuss a large order for computer equipment and installation. The customer liked my proposal but had some questions, so we arranged to meet. Meetings on Friday afternoons are tricky, especially in the summer when clients are already thinking about their weekends. As I predicted, the customer called just before I was leaving the office and canceled the meeting, saying he had answered his own questions and that I should expect a purchase order next week. I was in a great mood. Not only was I about to get a huge commission for this order, but I also had time to get home before Beth left for her trip. I thought maybe I could cancel a hired car and take her to the airport myself. I got home a little before 3:00 p.m., about to call out and announce my arrival, when I heard Beth laughing upstairs. I also heard a man's voice on what sounded like speakerphone, though I couldn't make out what he was saying. From the tone of the voice, I could tell it was a man. Beth stopped laughing and said no in a playful way. I didn't suspect anything at first. I fully believed she was going for training and didn't have any reason to mistrust her. I started to take off my shoes, but then I heard the man's voice again, followed by Beth giggling. I quietly walked upstairs and peeked through the bedroom door. Beth had her back to me and was packing a small suitcase. She was wearing a tight red dress that came down to the middle of her thighs. It was so tight that I could see the outline of her body, and there was no panty line. Beth's phone was on speaker mode. Lying on the bed, the man on the phone asked why she had suddenly decided to go away with him. He said he'd been after her for weeks, but she wouldn't even let him kiss or hug her. He wasn't complaining, just curious. Beth explained that this was a serious step for her, something she'd never done before, but she decided he was right. She was more than just a wife, she was her own woman, and she wanted to have fun with a man who wasn't her husband. She continued, saying that after the weekend, she'd tell me everything. She'd answer all my questions completely and honestly. I'd be upset, of course, but I'd get over it because I loved her too much to let a weekend with another man disrupt our marriage. She reassured the guy that no one would come between us, not him or anyone else. It was just a weekend of fun, nothing more. I realized then that the man on the phone was Tom, her coworker. Beth went on to tell Tom that she hadn't told me her plans in advance because she didn't want to fight. She didn't want me spending the weekend angry, upset, and imagining what they were doing in bed. She figured it would be better to explain everything when she returned on Sunday. She thought I would be more understanding by then and able to ask her whatever questions I had. Tom, still on speaker, mentioned how he'd been fantasizing about their weekend together all week. They'd go out for dinner tonight because that's what Beth wanted. But after that, he wasn't planning to get out of bed until they left the resort on Sunday. Beth laughed and reassured him that she was bringing plenty of protections. She picked up a box of condoms, shook it near the phone for Tom to hear, and put it in her suitcase. Tom asked why she was bothering to bring protections since they wouldn't need them. Beth replied that she didn't want to bring home any unwelcome gifts that Tom might have and pass them on to her. Tom teased her, saying she'd probably give up on using them after the first time or two, and Beth laughed again, saying, "We'll see." Tom then asked if she thought it would be okay for them to continue as lovers after this weekend. Would I be fine with them going on dates, spending nights together, or even weekends away? Beth told him not to get ahead of himself. They should just focus on this weekend and have fun. Tom shouldn't pester her about the future. She needed to see how freaked out I would be after I found out. Tom suggested she not tell me about any of this, but Beth said I was going to know everything. She wasn't going to sneak around behind my back, at least not again, after this weekend. Tom said he'd be at the house in 30 minutes, and asked if she wanted him to come to the door. Beth said no, she didn't want the neighbors to see him coming to the door and thinking they were going on a date. After they got off the phone, I considered confronting Beth immediately, but decided I wanted to see how many lies she'd tell me before I called her out. I quietly went back downstairs, put my shoes back on, and opened the front door, then slammed it shut to make it seem like I had just gotten home. I called out her name, and she shouted down, asking why I was home early. I went upstairs to her bedroom, where Beth was now hurriedly closing her bag. She looked nervous and asked again why I was home so early. I ignored her question, and instead asked where she was going, dressed like that. Was she really planning to get on a plane dressed like this? She responded, saying the venue for the training had changed. It was now the resort closer to home, only about 45 minutes away by car, so they had decided to drive instead of flying. Who are they? I asked, already knowing the answer. Beth told me that Tom, her coworker, was going to the training as well, and had generously offered to drive them both. So you dressed up like this for Tom? I asked. Beth laughed nervously, saying, "No, silly. There's a dress-up welcoming dinner for the attendees. That's why I'm wearing an evening dress." She twirled around, asking how she looked. I ignored her, walking closer, and without saying anything, I grabbed the hem of her dress and pulled it up. No panties. Clearly no bra either, I said, now glaring at her. Beth's face turned red. She claimed the dress was designed to be worn without a bra, and that she'd taken off her panties because the dress was tighter than when she bought it. I must have put on weight, and the panties were visible, she shrugged, so I took them off. Then she asked, "Why are you asking so many questions? It's just a boring training weekend." I didn't respond. Instead, I asked her, "Why are you taking protections to a boring training weekend?" Beth's face went white. She stuttered, asking what I was talking about, trying to act confused. "What protections? Have you lost your mind?" she asked. I calmly walked over to her suitcase, unzipped it, and dumped all its contents on the floor. As I kicked her clothes around, I found what I was looking for, a box of condoms. I picked it up, shook it, and then dumped its contents on the floor. Beth fell to her knees, trying to stuff everything back into the suitcase, muttering, "Do we have to do this right now? Tom will be here any minute, and you're starting a fight just when I have to leave. I don't have time for this." I stood over her and asked again, "Why are you taking protections?" Finally, she admitted it. "There's no training," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm going to spend the weekend with Tom. It's just something I have to do." She looked up at me with pleading eyes and continued, "I didn't want to tell you earlier because I didn't want you to spend the weekend worrying or imagining crazy things. I was going to tell you everything when I got back on Sunday. We'd talk about why I needed to do this, and I'd answer all your questions." I stared at her in disbelief as she kept talking. "I only lied because I didn't want you to freak out and do something insane. There's nothing you can do to stop this." "Oh, like you've been completely honest about your plan so far," I shot back. Beth blushed and continued, "Look, I'm doing this for myself. It's something I need. But this weekend with Tom doesn't mean anything. When I come back on Sunday, we'll discuss everything, and you'll understand. This weekend won't change anything between us." "How long have you been hooking up with Tom?" I asked coldly. Beth shook her head. I haven't. I haven't been with another man since our first date 10 years ago. I've never kissed, hugged, or been intimate with Tom or anyone else. I've been completely faithful to you." She insisted she wasn't interested in a relationship with Tom or anyone else, claiming it was just something I have to do for fun. She looked me in the eyes and said, "I love you, Brad. I would never leave you for another man. My attraction to Tom is purely physical. It's just an itch that needs to be scratched. That's all. She tried to reassure me that she would be back on Sunday, and that this would be the end of it. She didn't want to be with Tom long term. It was just a meaningless fling. I told her, I don't believe a word you're saying. She responded, believe it or not, it's true. I've been faithful to you, and I will be again after this weekend. I couldn't believe her delusion. You actually think this won't affect our marriage? If you leave with Tom, we're done. I'll divorce you, I said firmly. She looked at me with a frown and told me I was being dramatic. Beth calmly zipped up her suitcase and said, you're making too much of this. We're not getting divorced over this. You and I have slept together for thousands of nights. I'm going to spend 2 nights with Tom, just 2 nights. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what we have. This is something I have to do, and threatening me with divorce isn't going to stop me. She looked at her watch and said, I have to go now. We can talk about everything when I get back on Sunday. Don't go crazy before we talk. She grabbed her suitcase and started walking toward the door. If you love me, you won't try to stop me, she added. I told her, if you loved me, you wouldn't be going away with another man. She insisted that she loved me unconditionally, was completely happy with me, and that this was just something she had to do for herself. I don't love Tom. There's no emotional connection. It's just sex. It has nothing to do with our wonderful marriage, she explained, still delusional. I told her, if you leave with Tom, you won't be welcome back in this house. Beth waved me off and said, stop acting like a child. I'll be back on Sunday, and we can talk then. Everything will go back to normal. She told me to grow up as she opened the door, but before she could walk out, I called her name and walked toward her. Beth turned and smiled at me, probably thinking I was about to give her a kiss and say goodbye. Instead, I slapped her across the face. She fell to the ground, completely stunned. I was shocked myself. I had never hit a woman before. I wasn't proud of what I had done, but I wasn't going to let her walk out like that. Beth looked up at me from the ground, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. I bent down to help her up, but she recoiled, curling into a ball and covering her head with her arms. She must have thought I was going to hit her again. I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do, before grabbing the back of her dress to pull her up. The dress tore down her back, revealing more than I ever wanted to see in that moment. I pulled her to her feet, opened the front door, and shoved her outside onto the lawn. I threw her suitcase and the contents of her bag onto the grass beside her. I kept her purse. She was crying now, her voice trembling as she begged me to stop. Brad, please, you don't understand. Let me explain. We can talk about this. I wasn't having any of it. You'll be safe as long as you never come back here again. I don't ever want to see your face, I told her coldly. I slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. Through the door, I heard Beth sobbing, and then I heard Tom's voice as he pulled up. Are you okay? He asked her, but Beth kept crying. Tom, not surprisingly, suggested they should still leave, trying to salvage their weekend plans. Let's just get to the resort. You can change and clean yourself up when we get there, he said, his voice full of false reassurance. He even mentioned that they could still have a great time, completely ignoring the fact that Beth was a wreck. Tom asked if he should repack her suitcase or just leave it behind, noting that she could always buy whatever she needed at the resort. But Beth, still sobbing, told him to leave. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said between sobs. I need to stay and try to save my marriage. Tom tried to reason with her, reminding her that the trip was already paid for and that she had promised to go. He even accused her of teasing him for weeks and playing coy. He continued pressuring her, saying it was too late to back out now. But Beth, seemingly coming to her senses, told him, You're not my boyfriend, and you never will be. I must have been out of my mind to even consider going anywhere with you. She paused and then added, Get out of here, Tom. Don't contact me again. Tom wasn't ready to give up. He must have grabbed her arm because I heard Beth shout, Get your hands off me. That was enough for me. I opened the front door and stepped outside. Beth asked you to leave, I said in a low, menacing voice. Now I'm telling you to get off my property. You have until the count of 3. Tom looked at me, clearly sizing up the situation, and must have realized that he didn't want to test me. I began counting 1, 2, and took a step forward. Without saying another word, Tom turned and bolted toward his car. He sped away without looking back. Beth was still crying, barely able to speak. I'm so sorry, she gasped. I don't know what I was thinking. I must have been out of my mind. She thanked me for knocking sense into her, and admitted that she had been completely delusional. I can always count on you to see through the BS and do what's best for me, she said, her tears streaming down her face. I need you, Brad. I need us. She begged me to let her back in the house, saying she would do anything to fix the damage she had done. "You're the love of my life, and I can't bear the thought that I've hurt you like this," she cried. "Please, Brad, I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you." But I stood firm. "It's too late, Beth. The moment you opened that door to leave with Tom, our marriage was over." Beth's sobs grew louder. "No, please, it wasn't real. I never slept with him, Brad, I swear. You have to believe me. I was going to turn back. I was going to cancel it. But her words meant nothing to me. You lied to me, Beth. Over and over again. You can't come back in the house. We're done." I turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind me. Beth was left standing on the porch, crying harder than ever. I still had her purse inside. I opened it, took out her wallet, and removed her credit cards. There was very little cash. Then I tried to open her phone, but I didn't know her password. I'd never gone through her phone before, but now I was determined to see what she had been hiding. I opened the door again and demanded her password. Beth gave it to me without hesitation. No questions, no resistance. I went through her call history and found fewer than a dozen calls between her and Tom over the last month, but no incriminating emails. Then I went through her texts. Most of them were Tom whining about how Beth had been distant with him, apologizing for trying to hug and kiss her, but also telling her how irresistible she was. He kept calling her the most desirable woman he had ever met. I scrolled further and found messages from Beth, mostly deflecting his advances. She had agreed to spend the weekend with him just a week ago, and they had been working out the details ever since. It was Tom's idea to tell me that she was going on a work trip, and that her office had arranged for a car to pick her up. Still, there was nothing in the texts that confirmed she had slept with him or anyone else. I went through her social media accounts, but there wasn't much there either. Most of her posts were about work, property she was selling or had sold. There was nothing to suggest she was seeing anyone behind my back. After I finished looking, I threw her phone and purse out onto the porch. Beth was sitting on the chair, shivering despite it being summer. She had put on the sweater she'd packed, and I could see her repacking her suitcase. "You should leave before you freeze," I told her coldly. But Beth refused to leave. "I'm not going anywhere until we talk," she said, her voice trembling. I shut the door without responding and went back inside. I called Beth's father. He and I had always gotten along well. We were similar in many ways. When he answered, I explained what had happened, telling him that Beth had planned to spend the weekend with a coworker, and I kicked her out. "We're divorcing," I said. "She's sitting on the porch now, refusing to leave. You need to come pick her up." Beth's father asked what I meant by spending a weekend with her coworker. I told him the full story, explaining how she had lied about the work trip and planned a weekend away with Tom. It was all a lie. I don't want to hear any more excuses from her, and I'm not letting her back into this house. She can stay on the porch until you get here, or you can leave her outside. That's up to you. Her father arrived about 30 minutes later. He asked Beth what had happened, and to my surprise, she told him everything. She didn't hide any of the details, admitting that she had planned the trip with Tom, but hadn't actually gone through with it. Beth's father told her she needed to come home with him, but she refused. "I have to stay and talk to Brad. I need to get him to forgive me," she said, still sobbing. Her father tried to reason with her, saying, "That's not going to happen tonight. You need to give him time to cool down. You both do." After about 20 minutes of back and forth between them, Beth finally agreed to leave. They drove away, with Beth still crying in the car. Her father called me from the car, with Beth's crying in the background. He told me, "She's ashamed of herself, Brad. She knows she made a huge mistake. I'm ashamed of her too. But I want you to take some time and think about what you want to do. She didn't go through with it, so maybe give her some credit for that. But I'll support your decision, no matter what." After the weekend, Beth texted or called me every hour, begging for forgiveness. I didn't respond to any of her messages. I went to see a divorce attorney on Monday afternoon. Since we live in a no-fault state, the divorce would mean a 50-50 split of everything. We might have to sell a house, and Beth could insist on alimony, since I make more than she does. Despite everything, I haven't fully decided what to do yet. I told the attorney to start the paperwork, and I changed the locks on the house. On Monday evening, Beth sent me a long, rambling email. I'll summarize it here. In the email, Beth apologized again, saying she loved me and didn't want a divorce. She admitted that what she did was horrible and hurtful, but she hoped I would give her a second chance. She outlined several things she had done since Friday and some suggestions on how she could make things right. First, Beth said she called her boss on Saturday morning and quit her job. She explained that it wasn't because she was worried about Tom. She claimed that when she thought of him now, she felt nothing but disgust. She had blocked him and would not respond to any attempts he made to contact her. She didn't quit out of fear of being around Tom, but because she didn't want me to worry about her being in the same workplace as him. She even mentioned that she had already found a job at a different real estate agency and would start next week. If I didn't want her to work, she said, she'd happily stay home, whatever I wanted. Second, she admitted that the stupidest thing she ever said was that she was more than just my wife. She now realized that being my wife was all she ever wanted, and that her true dream was to be the best wife, and one day the mother of my children. She asked if I could ever forgive her for saying something so hurtful and idiotic. Third, Beth said she had made an appointment with a therapist. Although she claimed that the therapy I gave her when I stopped her from leaving on Friday was all she needed, she thought it was a good idea to seek professional help to understand why she had acted the way she did. She wanted to explore why she had gone insane, and said she was more than willing to talk through her issues with a therapist. Fourth, Beth acknowledged that she had lied to me about the work trip, and because of that, I had no reason to trust her anymore. However, she insisted that she had never been with another man since we met. No kisses, hugs, or intimate moments. She said I was more than enough for her in every possible way. She wanted to rebuild the trust and offered to take a polygraph test to prove her fidelity. She said I could choose the examiner, provide the questions, and that she would pay for the test. If she failed, she promised to agree to a divorce immediately. She also offered to take future polygraphs if I ever doubted her again. Fifth, she promised to give me full access to her phone, iPad, and computer at any time. I could check her devices whenever I wanted, without notice. Sixth, Beth proposed signing a postnuptial agreement. The postnup would state that if I ever felt she was being unfaithful, I could divorce her, and she would get nothing, no alimony, no part of the house, only what she brought into the marriage. She also agreed that I wouldn't need to prove her infidelity. If I thought she was behaving inappropriately with someone else, I could throw her out and initiate divorce proceedings under the terms of the postnup. She acknowledged that this could potentially put her at a disadvantage, but she was willing to take that risk if it meant I would give her a second chance. Seventh, Beth said she would tell everyone, our families, friends, and anyone I wanted, about her crazy behavior. She was willing to humiliate herself in front of everyone to prove how much she loved me and how deeply she regretted her actions. She claimed she didn't care about what anyone thought of her. The only thing that mattered was me and our marriage. Eighth, she vowed that she would do anything I asked. She would accept any punishment or terms I wanted to impose on her. She was ready to suffer, to prove that she deserved another chance. After reading her email, I found myself asking what I should do next. Should I reconcile with her or proceed with the divorce? Should I go through with the postnup and have her take the polygraph? Or should I just stop wasting time and end it all now? I didn't want to ask my family and friends for advice because if I decided to reconcile, I didn't want Beth's actions to become public knowledge. I didn't want to embarrass her in front of everyone, and I knew that most of the people in my life would probably tell me to take her back. They would say, she didn't actually leave for the weekend. She didn't sleep with another man. She came to her senses in time. But in my mind, it wasn't that simple. She had lied to me, and if I let her get away with it this time, what would stop her from doing the same thing again? What if she had another moment of temporary insanity? Could I really trust her again? So here I am, asking for advice from people who don't have a personal stake in this, hoping for honest, unbiased opinions. Should I give Beth the second chance she's begging for? Or should I go through with the divorce and move on with my life?